I never imagined my life would unfold this way. As a certified financial advisor and CPA, I prided myself on the pristine image I projected. My clients saw me as a trustworthy professional, managing their assets with utmost diligence. Little did they know, beneath this polished surface lay a master strategist, adept at navigating the murky waters of financial subterfuge. My expertise had amassed substantial wealth, and I lived a life of luxury with my wife, Melissa, blissfully unaware of the intricate web I wove. But all facades eventually crack, and mine was no exception. It all started innocuously enough. My career took off quickly after college, thanks to my knack for understanding complex financial systems and my unwavering dedication to my clients. Word of my expertise spread, and soon, I was handling the portfolios of some of the wealthiest individuals in the country. With each success, my reputation grew, and so did my ambition. Melissa and I met at a summer gala, her captivating blue eyes and infectious laughter drawing me in immediately. Our courtship was a whirlwind of romance and shared dreams. We got married in a lavish ceremony that made the front page of the society section. Our life together seemed perfect to the outside world. A beautiful estate, luxury cars, exotic vacations. Melissa, with her stunning figure and captivating personality, was the perfect partner. But as our marriage deepened, so did the complexities of my professional life. One evening, after a particularly challenging day, I was in my study, sipping a glass of scotch. The room, with its mahogany shelves lined with financial tomes and legal documents, was my sanctuary. Melissa walked in, her face lit by the soft glow of the desk lamp. "Tommy, you've been working late every night this week. Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I looked up from my laptop, forcing a smile. "Just a busy week, darling. You know how it is with the end of the financial quarter." She walked over, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You need to take care of yourself too. All this work can't be good for you." I know, I said, placing my hand over hers. "I'll try to wrap up early tomorrow. How about we go out for dinner? Your favorite restaurant?" Her face brightened. "I'd love that." As she left the room, I leaned back in my chair, the weight of my double life pressing down on me. I had built a network of offshore accounts, shell companies, and complex financial structures designed to hide the true extent of my wealth. My clients trusted me implicitly, and I used that trust to maneuver their funds in ways that skirted the edges of legality. My phone buzzed on the desk, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from Gerald Hayes, one of my most demanding clients. "Need to move $2 million by end of week. Can you handle it?" I typed back quickly, "Consider it done." Gerald was a ruthless businessman, the kind who thrived on the margins of the law. He valued my discretion and efficiency, and I valued his patronage. Our relationship was built on a mutual understanding. I kept his money safe and growing, and he kept the details of my operations under wraps. As I stared at the screen, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Melissa had no idea about this side of my life. To her, I was just a dedicated financial advisor, someone who made sure our bills were paid and our lifestyle was maintained. The secrets I kept from her were like cracks in the foundation of our marriage, slowly widening with each lie. The next day, during a client meeting, I found myself distracted. Richard, a longtime client, was discussing his plans for a new investment, but my mind kept drifting back to Melissa and the life I had built on a foundation of deceit. "Thomas, are you even listening?" Richard's voice cut through my thoughts. "Of course, Richard. Just thinking about the best way to structure this investment," I replied smoothly, masking my inner turmoil. Richard leaned back in his chair, scrutinizing me. "You've always been the best at what you do, Thomas. Just make sure you keep your head in the game." "Don't worry, Richard. I've got everything under control," I assured him, though I wasn't entirely sure if I was trying to convince him or myself. As the meeting ended, I walked to my car, the weight of my dual life pressing heavily on my shoulders. The facade I had built was beginning to show its cracks, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Melissa and I met during a summer gala, her captivating blue eyes and infectious laughter drawing me in. I remember it vividly. She wore a flowing, emerald green dress that shimmered under the twinkling lights, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders like liquid gold. We locked eyes across the room, and in that moment, the world seemed to fade away. I was mesmerized by her grace, her charm, and the effortless way she commanded attention. Our courtship was a whirlwind of romance. Dinners at the finest restaurants, spontaneous weekend getaways to picturesque locales, and late-night conversations that made us feel invincible. We were the epitome of a perfect couple. When we decided to marry, we spared no expense. Our wedding was a grand affair, a celebration of love that left our guests in awe. The beginning of our marriage was everything we had dreamed of, living in our $5 million estate, surrounded by luxury and comfort. For the first few years, life was blissful. We hosted lavish parties, traveled the world, and reveled in the joys of our affluent lifestyle. Melissa, with her stunning figure and radiant smile, was the perfect partner. We were happy, or so it seemed. Yet 5 years into our marriage, I began to notice subtle changes in Melissa's behavior. She was more distant, her laughter less frequent. The once vibrant conversations we shared became stilted and brief. At first, I dismissed it as the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship, but the gnawing sense of unease grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as we were preparing for bed, I decided to broach the subject. "Melissa, is everything all right?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She looked up from her book, her eyes clouded with a hint of confusion. "What do you mean, Tommy?" "I don't know. You just seem different lately. Distant. Is there something on your mind?" I pressed gently. She sighed, closing her book and placing it on the nightstand. "It's nothing, really. Just a lot on my mind, I guess. Work stress." I probed, though I knew her life was relatively carefree. "No, it's not that," she said, avoiding my gaze. I don't know. I feel a bit restless, I suppose." Her vague response only fueled my concern, but I decided not to push further. Instead, I wrapped my arms around her, hoping to bridge the growing distance between us. She leaned into my embrace, but the warmth we once shared felt diminished, like a fading ember of a once roaring fire. The following weeks did little to assuage my worries. Melissa's behavior continued to perplex me. She was often lost in thought, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. The laughter that once filled our home was now a rare sound. It was during one of our weekend barbecues that I overheard a conversation that would change everything. "So, did you hear Jason Nelson is back in town?" a friend casually mentioned, their words cutting through the ambient chatter like a knife. Jason Nelson. The name struck me like a thunderbolt. Melissa's ex-boyfriend. They had dated seriously before we met, and though she assured me their relationship was long over, the mention of his name sent a chill down my spine. Later that night, as we cleaned up from the barbecue, I decided to confront her. "Melissa, I heard Jason is back in town," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. Her reaction was immediate. She stiffened, her eyes widening momentarily before she composed herself. "Oh, really? I hadn't heard." Her attempt at casual indifference was unconvincing. "You sure about that?" I asked, my voice tinged with suspicion. "Tommy, what are you implying?" She snapped, her defensiveness taking me aback. "I'm not implying anything," I said, raising my hands in a placating gesture. "I just noticed you've been distant lately, and now I hear Jason is back. I can't help but wonder if the two are connected." "You're being ridiculous," she said, turning away from me. "Jason and I are ancient history. There's nothing going on." But her words did little to quell my doubts. The cracks in our paradise were growing, and I could feel the foundations of our marriage beginning to shift. The once unshakable trust I had in Melissa was now marred by suspicion, and the perfect facade of our life together was starting to crumble. The first inkling of betrayal came during a weekend barbecue. Our backyard was filled with the laughter of friends, the sizzle of the grill, and the clinking of glasses. It was one of those perfect summer afternoons that made life feel effortless and joyful. But beneath the surface, an undercurrent of unease gnawed at me. "Did you hear Jason Nelson is back in town?" A friend mentioned casually, his words cutting through the ambient chatter like a knife. Jason Nelson. The name reverberated in my mind, dredging up memories of Melissa's past. They had been serious once, and though she assured me their relationship was long over, the mention of his name sent a chill down my spine. Later that night, as we cleaned up from the barbecue, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Melissa had been unusually quiet, her thoughts seemingly a million miles away. "Melissa, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She looked up from the sink, her eyes wary. "Of course, Tommy. What's on your mind?" "I heard Jason is back in town," I said, watching her reaction closely. Her face tightened ever so slightly before she forced a smile. "Oh, really?" I hadn't heard. Her attempt at casual indifference was unconvincing. "You sure about that?" I asked, my voice tinged with suspicion. "Tommy, what are you implying?" She snapped, her defensiveness taking me aback. "I'm not implying anything," I said, raising my hands in a placating gesture. "I just noticed you've been distant lately. And now I hear Jason is back. I can't help but wonder if the two are connected." "You're being ridiculous," she said, turning away from me. "Jason and I are ancient history. There's nothing going on." But her words did little to quell my doubts. Over the next few days, I noticed subtle changes in Melissa's behavior. She became more secretive, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, her laughter less frequent. I caught her smiling at messages she received, her face lighting up in a way that felt both familiar and alien. It was a look she hadn't given me in months. One evening, as we sat in the living room, I decided to probe further. "Melissa, who are you texting so much these days?" She glanced at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Just friends, Tommy. Why are you so paranoid?" "I'm not paranoid," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's just that you've been so distant lately, and I'm worried about us." "There's nothing to worry about," she insisted, but her tone lacked conviction. Days turned into weeks, and the unease within me grew. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, my mind racing with thoughts of Melissa and Jason. The fear of confronting the truth held me back, and I found solace in denial. I wanted to believe her, to trust her implicitly as I once did. But reality has a way of breaking through, no matter how hard you try to keep it at bay. One afternoon, I decided to take action. I left work early, driven by a gnawing need to uncover the truth. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Melissa's car parked haphazardly, a sign of her rushed return home. I stepped inside quietly, my heart pounding in my chest. I found her in the living room, her back to me as she spoke animatedly into her phone. "I miss you too," she said softly, her voice filled with an emotion that pierced through me like a dagger. My heart sank. I cleared my throat, and she spun around, her face paling. "Tommy, you're home early. Who were you talking to?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain calm. "Just a friend," she said, her eyes darting away from mine. "Melissa, I heard what you said," I replied, my voice breaking. "I heard you say you miss him." Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized she couldn't deny it any longer. "Tommy, is it Jason?" I demanded, my anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, it's Jason. But it's not what you think." "Not what I think," I echoed, my voice rising. "You're secretly talking to your ex-boyfriend and telling him you miss him. What am I supposed to think?" "Tommy, please," she pleaded, reaching out to touch my arm. "It's just, I don't know. I was feeling lonely, and he reached out. It was innocent at first, but it isn't innocent anymore," I finished for her, pulling away from her touch. The cracks in our paradise were no longer subtle. They were gaping chasms, filled with lies and betrayal. I had to confront the truth, no matter how painful it was. The perfect facade of our life together had shattered, and there was no denying the reality of what lay beneath. The day I decided to confront Melissa was the hardest of my life. Armed with the knowledge of her infidelity, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. My heart pounded in my chest as I dialed the number of a trusted business associate, Mark, whose discretion and loyalty I had come to rely on over the years. If anyone could help me navigate this personal crisis with the precision it required, it was him. "Mark, I need your help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on, Tom?" he replied, concern evident in his tone. "It's about Melissa. I think she's seeing someone else. I need to know for sure." There was a brief pause before he answered. "All right, Tom. I'll see what I can do. Send me what you have, and I'll start looking into it." I provided him with the information I had, dates, times, and the unsettling pattern of behavior I had observed in Melissa. Within a few days, Mark had pieced together enough evidence to confirm my worst fears. Melissa had been meeting Jason during her lunch breaks, their encounters carefully timed and concealed. The morning of the confrontation, I felt a cold resolve settle over me. I knew where they would be having lunch, thanks to Mark's meticulous tracking. As I drove to the restaurant, my mind raced with thoughts of what I would say, how I would handle the inevitable confrontation. The facade of calm I projected was a thin veneer over the storm brewing inside me. When I arrived, I spotted them immediately. They were seated in a corner booth, deep in conversation, unaware of my presence. Melissa's face was animated as she spoke, a stark contrast to the distant and withdrawn expression she had worn around me lately. Jason leaned in, his eyes locked on her, his hand resting lightly on hers. I took a deep breath, straightened my jacket, and walked towards them. Sliding into the booth opposite them, I greeted Melissa with a calm, controlled demeanor that belied the turmoil inside me. "Hello, Melissa," I said, my voice steady. Melissa's eyes widened in shock and fear. "Tommy, what are you doing here?" "I think the more pertinent question is, what are you doing here, Melissa?" I replied, my gaze shifting to Jason, who looked equally taken aback. "Jason, I presume," I continued, extending a hand. "I'm Thomas, Melissa's husband." Jason hesitated before shaking my hand, his grip firm but uneasy. "Nice to meet you, Thomas. The pleasure is all mine, I assure you," I said, my tone icy. Turning back to Melissa, I added, "Won't you introduce me to your companion properly?" Melissa's face flushed with a mixture of guilt and fear. "Tommy, this isn't what it looks like." "Isn't it?" I countered, my eyes narrowing. "You've been meeting Jason behind my back, telling him you miss him. What exactly am I supposed to think?" Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearing his throat. "Thomas, if I may." "No, Jason, you may not," I interrupted sharply. "This is between me and my wife." The tension was palpable as Melissa struggled to find her voice. "Tommy, I never wanted to hurt you. I was feeling lonely, and Jason reached out. It was a mistake, but it's not what you think. We haven't." "Not yet. You mean," I said, finishing her sentence, but it's clear where this was heading. I turned to Jason, my eyes cold and hard. "Jason, you need to understand something very clearly. Melissa is my wife. Whatever feelings you think she has for you, they are nothing compared to the commitment she made to me. You will not see her again. Do I make myself clear?" Jason's face reddened, a mix of anger and embarrassment flashing across his features. "Thomas, Melissa is an adult. She can make her own decisions." "Yes, she can," I agreed, my tone deadly calm. "And she will. But you will not be a part of her life. If you have any respect for her, or for yourself, you'll walk away now." Melissa's eyes filled with tears as she looked at me, her voice trembling. "Tommy, please, let's talk about this somewhere else." I nodded, standing up. "We will. Jason, goodbye." As we left the restaurant, The weight of the confrontation settled heavily on my shoulders. The perfect facade of our life had shattered, but there was still a chance to salvage what remained. Melissa and I needed to have a long, painful conversation about trust, betrayal, and the future of our marriage. But for now, I had laid my cards on the table, and there was no turning back. The tension was thick as Melissa and I left the restaurant, walking silently towards the car. Her eyes were downcast, her steps hesitant, as if she were walking towards an uncertain fate. I could feel the weight of the confrontation bearing down on both of us, but I knew it wasn't over yet. We needed privacy, a place where we could speak freely without the prying eyes of strangers. "Melissa, follow me," I said, my voice firm, but not unkind. I led her to the restaurant's men's room, locking the door behind us. The stark, cold tiles and the harsh fluorescent lighting added a surreal quality to the moment, as if we were actors in a play with no script to guide us. "Tommy, please," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry." I held up a hand to stop her. "Save it, Melissa. We need to have a real conversation, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Okay." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. "First of all, look at yourself," I said, gesturing to her outfit. "The dress, no bra. What were you thinking?" She looked down, shame coloring her cheeks. "I don't know. I wanted to feel attractive, to feel something." "Something you thought you lost with me?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. "No, Tommy, it's not that," she said quickly. "I just felt lonely. You've been so busy with work, and I felt like we were drifting apart. When Jason reached out, it was like a lifeline. I know it was wrong, but I wasn't thinking clearly." I took a step closer, my eyes locking onto hers. "Melissa, I need you to understand something. You've put our entire marriage at risk for a fling with an old boyfriend. Do you realize how much that hurts?" "I do," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know I messed up, and I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," I said, my voice hardening. "You have two choices. You can leave with Jason right now and face the consequences, or you can come home with me, and we try to salvage what's left of our marriage. But if you choose to stay, things have to change. You have to be honest with me, and you have to earn my trust back." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and guilt. "Tommy, I want to make things right. I want to come home with you and fix this. I love you, and I don't want to lose you." "Then you need to show me," I said, my voice softening slightly. "You need to prove that you're willing to put in the effort to rebuild what you've broken." "I will," she promised, her voice fervent. "I'll do whatever it takes." "All right," I said, taking a deep breath. "Then let's go home." The drive back was silent, filled with the unspoken understanding that our lives would never be the same. Melissa stared out the window, her expression a mixture of remorse and determination. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with thoughts of how we would navigate the road ahead. When we arrived home, I parked the car and turned to her. "Melissa, this isn't going to be easy. We're going to have to work hard to rebuild the trust that's been broken. Are you ready for that?" "Yes, Tommy," she said, her voice steady. "I'm ready." We walked into the house together, the door closing behind us with a heavy finality. In the quiet of our home, the reality of the situation settled over us. There was no turning back now. We had made our choices, and the path forward would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. If we were willing to fight for our marriage, maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal. Back home, the air was thick with tension and unspoken words. Melissa sat on the edge of our bed, her shoulders hunched and tears streaming down her face. The weight of her guilt seemed almost palpable, hanging in the room like a dense fog. I stood in the doorway, watching her, torn between my love for her and the profound sense of betrayal that gnawed at my heart. "Tommy," I'm so sorry, she choked out, her voice breaking. I never meant for things to go this far. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Melissa, you have to understand how hard this is for me. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and right now, that foundation is cracked. We need to rebuild it, but it's not going to be easy. She nodded vigorously, wiping her tears. I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I love you, Tommy. I don't want to lose you. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation that needed to happen. All right, here's what we need to do if we're going to move forward. First, transparency. No more secrets, no more lies. I need to know where you are, who you're with, and what you're doing at all times. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and earnest. I understand. I'll be completely open with you. Second, honesty. I continued. If you're feeling lonely or neglected, you need to tell me. We can't fix problems we don't acknowledge. I promise, Tommy. I'll be honest with you from now on, she said, her voice trembling with sincerity. And lastly, I said, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach, we need to put safeguards in place. I want us to sign a postnuptial agreement. It will protect both of us, ensuring that if something like this ever happens again, we both know where we stand. Melissa's face fell slightly, but she nodded. If that's what it takes to rebuild your trust, then I'll do it. I walked over and sat beside her on the bed, taking her hand in mine. Melissa, I still love you. Despite everything, my feelings for you haven't changed. But I need time to heal, and I need you to be patient with me. Can you do that? She squeezed my hand tightly, her eyes filled with hope and determination. Yes, Tommy, I can. I will. In the days that followed, we began the slow and painful process of rebuilding our relationship. Melissa was true to her word, making every effort to be transparent and honest. She shared her daily routines, her thoughts, and her feelings with me, no matter how trivial they seemed. It was a stark contrast to the secrecy it had defined the past few months, and I found myself cautiously optimistic. One evening, as we sat in the living room, the silence was broken by a knock on the door. I stood up, feeling a pang of anxiety, and opened it to find our lawyer, Richard, standing there with a folder in hand. Evening, Thomas. Melissa, he greeted us with a nod. I've drafted the postnuptial agreement you requested. Thank you, Richard, I said, stepping aside to let him in. Let's get this over with. We sat around the dining table as Richard laid out the documents. Melissa and I read through them carefully, the terms clear and unequivocal. It was a safeguard, a way to protect myself from future betrayal, but it also felt like a heavy, formal acknowledgement of our fractured trust. Do you both understand the terms? Richard asked, looking between us. Yes, Melissa replied softly, glancing at me. I understand. Then let's sign, I said, picking up the pen. As we signed the agreement, I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. It was a necessary step, but it also underscored the reality of our situation. Trust, once broken, could be mended, but it would never be the same. After Richard left, Melissa and I sat in silence for a while, the weight of the evening settling over us. Finally, she spoke. Tommy, thank you for giving me another chance. I know it won't be easy, but I promise I'll do everything I can to make this work. I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. I know you will, Melissa, and I'll try too. We both made mistakes, but we can learn from them. We have to, if we want to move forward. She nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. I love you, Tommy. I love you too, I said, feeling a glimmer of hope. We'll get through this together. And so we began the arduous journey of healing. It was fraught with challenges, moments of doubt, and painful reminders of what had been lost. But amidst the turmoil, there was also a renewed sense of commitment and a determination to rebuild what had been broken. Despite everything, my love for Melissa remained, and I was willing to give her another chance, albeit with a guarded heart. The days that followed were filled with tension and tentative steps towards rebuilding trust. Every moment felt fragile, as if we were navigating a thin sheet of ice, unsure which step might cause it to crack beneath us. Melissa, true to her word, made every effort to be transparent. She showed me every message Jason sent, proving her commitment to our marriage and her willingness to mend the broken trust between us. "Tommy, look," she said one evening, handing me her phone. A new message from Jason had popped up on the screen. "I haven't responded. I wanted you to see it first." I took the phone, reading the message. It was a simple, "Hey, how are you?" But the significance of her showing it to me was profound. "Thank you, Melissa," I said, handing it back. "Block his number." She nodded and did as I asked, a small but significant step in the right direction. I, in turn, softened my approach. I realized that rebuilding our relationship would require patience and effort from both sides. I couldn't just demand transparency. I had to be willing to listen, to understand the reasons behind her actions, and to work on my own shortcomings. We decided to seek counseling, understanding that we needed a neutral space to unearth our buried emotions and grievances. Our therapist, Dr. Lang, was a calm, empathetic woman with a knack for digging deep without making us feel exposed. During our first session, Dr. Lang asked us to describe our feelings in the aftermath of the betrayal. It was a painful process, but necessary. "Tommy, why don't you start?" she suggested, her voice gentle but firm. I took a deep breath, glancing at Melissa before speaking. "I feel hurt, betrayed. I thought our marriage was strong, and to find out she was confiding in someone else, it broke something inside me." Melissa's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't interrupt. Dr. Lang nodded, encouraging me to continue. "I also feel responsible. Maybe I was too focused on work, too distant. I should have noticed she was feeling lonely." "Melissa, how do you feel hearing that?" Dr. Lang asked, turning her attention to my wife. "I feel terrible," Melissa said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt Tommy. I was just so lonely, and when Jason reached out, it felt like a lifeline. But it was a mistake, and I know that now. I want to make things right." Dr. Lang leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady and compassionate. "Rebuilding trust is a gradual process. It requires honesty, patience, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Tommy, what do you need from Melissa to start healing?" "I need her to be open with me, to share her feelings and not hide things," I said. "And I need time. This isn't something that can be fixed overnight." "Melissa, are you willing to do that?" Dr. Lang asked. "Yes," Melissa replied without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." The counseling sessions were intense, often leaving us emotionally drained. We unearthed buried resentments, shared our fears, and confronted the painful reality of our situation. It was a difficult process, but slowly the walls between us began to crumble, replaced by a fragile but growing bond. One evening, after a particularly tough session, we sat together on the couch, a shared silence enveloping us. Melissa reached for my hand, her touch tentative. "Tommy, I'm really trying," she said softly. "I know it's hard, but I believe we can get through this." I squeezed her hand gently. "I believe it too, Melissa. It's going to take time, but I'm willing to put in the effort if you are." "I am," she said, her eyes earnest. "I love you, and I want to make this work." We leaned into each other, finding solace in our shared commitment to rebuild what had been broken. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. As the weeks turned into months, our efforts began to pay off. We started communicating more openly, sharing our thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment. The transparency we practiced became a cornerstone of our renewed relationship, and though the trust wasn't fully restored, it was slowly being rebuilt, brick by brick. One day, as we were having breakfast, Melissa looked at me with a smile. "You know, I've been thinking, maybe we should plan a trip, just the two of us. A fresh start, somewhere new." I considered her suggestion, feeling a warm sense of possibility. I think that's a great idea. We could use a change of scenery, a chance to reconnect. She beamed, and for a moment, the shadows of the past seemed to lift. We were far from perfect, but we were trying, and that made all the difference. Together, we were learning to navigate the complexities of trust, love, and forgiveness, one day at a time. Despite our progress, Jason's persistent presence loomed over us like a dark cloud. His refusal to let go was a constant reminder of the fragility of our renewed commitment. The messages continued to trickle in, each one a reminder of the temptation that had nearly torn us apart. Melissa's transparency was a balm, but each new message from Jason felt like a dagger to my heart. "Tommy, I got another message from Jason," Melissa said one evening, her voice tinged with a mix of frustration and anxiety. She handed me her phone, and I read the latest missive from Jason. "Hey Melissa, just thinking about you. Can we talk? I miss our conversations." I clenched my jaw, the familiar wave of anger and hurt washing over me. "He just doesn't give up, does he?" "I'm sorry, Tommy," she said, her eyes pleading. "I haven't responded to any of his messages. I'm trying to do the right thing." "I know you are," I replied, softening my tone. "But this needs to stop. He's not respecting our boundaries." "What should we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. "We need to take more drastic measures. I'll talk to Mark. Maybe he can help us find a way to make Jason understand that he needs to back off." The following day, I met with Mark in his office. His experience and connections in the business world often extended into areas that required a delicate touch and firm resolve. "Mark, I need your help with something personal," I said as we settled into his sleek, modern office. "What's going on, Tom?" he asked, leaning forward with a concerned expression. "It's Jason. He's been harassing Melissa, trying to lure her back. Despite her transparency and our efforts to rebuild, he just won't let go. I need to find a way to make him understand that he needs to stay away." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "That's a tough situation. Have you considered a restraining order?" "I have, but I'm not sure that would be enough. He's persistent and seems to thrive on the drama. I need something more definitive." Mark leaned back, considering my words. "There are ways to make someone understand the gravity of their actions without resorting to legal measures. I can arrange a meeting with Jason. Sometimes, a face-to-face conversation, coupled with a few veiled threats, can be very persuasive." I hesitated, the idea of intimidation leaving a sour taste in my mouth. "I don't want anyone to get hurt, Mark. Just make him understand that this needs to stop." Mark nodded. "Understood. I'll handle it. Trust me, Tom. I'll make sure he gets the message." A few days later, Mark informed me that the meeting was set. Jason would be meeting with him at a neutral location, unaware of the true purpose of the encounter. I felt a mixture of apprehension and relief as I waited for news. That evening, as I sat with Melissa in our living room, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark. "Meeting went as planned. Jason understands the consequences of continuing his behavior. He shouldn't be bothering you or Melissa anymore." I read the message aloud, and Melissa let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Tommy. I hope this finally puts an end to it." "Me too," I said, taking her hand in mine. "We've come too far to let him ruin what we've rebuilt." For a few weeks, it seemed like the strategy had worked. The messages stopped, and we began to relax, enjoying the peace that had eluded us for so long. But just as we started to believe that Jason was truly gone, another message arrived. "I thought about what you said, but I can't just let go. We need to talk, Melissa. Please." Melissa showed me the message, her face pale. "Tommy, what do we do now?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "We stick to our plan. We document everything and prepare for the worst. But this time, I'm going to confront him myself. He needs to hear it directly from me." The next day, I arranged to meet Jason at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. As I walked in, I saw him sitting at a table by the window, a smug look on his face. I sat down across from him, my gaze steady and unflinching. "Jason," I began, my voice cold and firm. "This ends now. You need to stop contacting Melissa. She's made her choice, and it's not you." He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You think you can scare me off, Thomas. She'll come back to me eventually. She always does." I leaned forward, my voice low and menacing. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Jason. If you don't back off, there will be consequences. Serious consequences. You need to understand that Melissa is my wife, and I will do whatever it takes to protect her and our marriage." He blinked, the confidence in his eyes faltering. "You're bluffing." "Try me," I said, standing up. "This is your final warning. Leave us alone, or you'll regret it." As I walked away, I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. Jason's presence was a threat to everything I held dear, but I was willing to fight for my marriage. Melissa and I had come too far to let a ghost from the past tear us apart. When I returned home, Melissa was waiting anxiously. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It went as well as it could," I said, pulling her into my arms. "He knows what's at stake now. Hopefully, this will be the end of it." "I hope so too," she whispered, holding me tightly. "I just want us to move forward together." "We will," I promised, kissing the top of her head. "We'll get through this, Melissa, one step at a time." And so, we continued our journey of healing and rebuilding, determined to weather the storms together, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The constant threat of Jason's interference was a shadow over our efforts to rebuild our marriage. I knew that as long as he believed he could manipulate the situation, we would never have peace. It was time to take control, to show him that his actions would not go unchallenged. I began by leveraging my extensive network of contacts. Over the years, my work had introduced me to individuals skilled in the art of persuasion, people who understood the subtleties of exerting influence without crossing legal boundaries. I reached out to a few trusted associates, explaining the situation and my need for a resolution. "Tom, leave it to me," Mark said during a call. "We'll set up a meeting, and I'll make sure Jason understands the gravity of his actions." "Thank you, Mark," I replied, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "I just want this to end. We need to move on." 2 days later, Mark arranged the meeting at a discreet location, a quiet upscale bar known for its privacy. I arrived early, settling into a booth where I could observe the entrance. The air was thick with anticipation, and I felt a calm determination settle over me. Jason walked in a few minutes later, looking confident and smug. He spotted me and made his way over, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thomas," he greeted me with a smirk. "I didn't expect you to be the one to confront me." "Jason," I replied, my tone cold and controlled. "This ends now." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "You really think you can scare me off? Melissa wants me, and there's nothing you can do about it." I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Jason. Let me be clear. Your continued interference will have severe repercussions. I've spoken to people who can make your life very difficult if you don't back off." His smirk faltered, replaced by a look of disbelief. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I asked, my voice calm but menacing. "I know everything about you, Jason. Your job, your finances, your family. If you don't stop harassing Melissa, you'll find out just how real my threats are." He stared at me, the realization of my seriousness dawning on him. "What are you going to do? Have me followed? Ruin my life?" "I don't need to do anything," I said, leaning back. "You will ruin your own life if you continue down this path. My associates will make sure of it. This is your final warning, Jason. Walk away now or face the consequences." Jason's face contorted with a mix of anger and fear. For the first time, he saw me not as a passive spouse, but as a formidable opponent. The stakes were high, and he knew it. "You think you can just intimidate me?" He spat, trying to regain his composure. "I don't need to intimidate you," I replied, my voice steady. "I just need to show you that I will protect my marriage at any cost. Make the smart choice, Jason. Leave us alone." He glared at me for a long moment before standing up abruptly. "This isn't over, Thomas." "Yes, it is," I said firmly. "You just don't know it yet." As he walked away, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The look of disbelief on his face was almost satisfying. I knew he would think twice before trying to contact Melissa again. When I returned home, Melissa was waiting anxiously in the living room. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with worry. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice trembling. I confronted him, I said, sitting down beside her. "He knows what will happen if he doesn't back off. I don't think we'll be hearing from him again." She let out a sigh of relief, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you, Tommy. I know this hasn't been easy." "It's not over yet," I said, taking her hand in mine. "But we're getting there. Together." She leaned into me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. We still had a long way to go, but I was prepared to do whatever it took to safeguard our marriage. The path ahead was uncertain, but we faced it together, stronger than before. The next few days passed without any messages from Jason. It seemed he had finally gotten the message. Melissa and I continued our journey of healing, each step bringing us closer to a place of trust and understanding. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset, Melissa turned to me with a smile. "Thank you for standing by me, Tommy. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm so grateful." "You do deserve it," I said, kissing her forehead. "We've both made mistakes, but we're working through them. That's what matters." "I love you," she whispered, her voice filled with sincerity. "I love you too," I replied, feeling the weight of our journey lift slightly. "And we'll get through this, one day at a time." And so we continued to rebuild, knowing that the road ahead would be challenging, but also knowing that we had the strength and determination to face it together. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Jason, life had settled into a tentative calm. Melissa and I continued our efforts to rebuild our marriage, each day a step towards regaining the trust that had been shattered. Despite the progress, I knew that a legal safeguard was necessary to protect both of us moving forward. It was time to introduce the postnuptial agreement. One evening, as we sat in the living room, I turned to Melissa with a serious expression. "Melissa, there's something we need to discuss." She looked up from her book, sensing the gravity in my tone. "What is it, Tommy?" I took a deep breath, reaching for a folder on the coffee table. "I've had a postnuptial agreement drawn up. It's a legal safety net to ensure that if anything like this ever happens again, my assets will be protected." Melissa's face paled slightly, but she nodded. "I understand. Can I see it?" I handed her the folder, watching as she carefully read through the document. The agreement was straightforward, outlining the division of assets and financial responsibilities in the event of another betrayal. It was not a pleasant task, but it was a necessary one. After a few minutes, she looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "Tommy, I want you to know that I understand why this is necessary. I've broken your trust, and I need to prove that I'm committed to making things right." "I appreciate that, Melissa," I said, my voice softening. "This agreement isn't just about protection. It's also a symbol of our renewed commitment. By signing it, we're both acknowledging the mistakes of the past and taking steps to ensure a stronger future." She nodded, taking the pen from my hand. "I know, and I want to do this, for us." With a steady hand, she signed the agreement, then handed it back to me. "There, it's done." "Thank you," I said, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. "This is a step towards rebuilding trust. It shows that we're both serious about moving forward." Melissa reached out, taking my hand in hers. "I am serious, Tommy. I love you, and I want to make this work." This agreement doesn't change that. It just reinforces our commitment to each other. I feel the same way, I said, squeezing her hand. We've come a long way, and we still have a long way to go. But I believe we can do it. Together. In the days that followed, the postnuptial agreement became a symbol of our renewed commitment. It was a tangible reminder of the promises we had made to each other, and the steps we were taking to ensure a stronger future. We continued our counseling sessions with Dr. Lang, delving deeper into our emotions and working through the lingering pain and mistrust. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Melissa turned to me as we walked back to the car. "Tommy, do you ever think about what our life will look like in a year or 5 years?" I smiled, considering her question. "I think about it a lot. I imagine a life where we've rebuilt our trust, where we're stronger and more connected than ever. A life where we can look back on this time and see how far we've come." She nodded, her eyes filled with hope. "I want that too. I know it won't be easy, but I'm committed to doing the work. For us. We're on the right path," I said, opening the car door for her. "We've faced some tough challenges, but we've also made a lot of progress. And I believe that as long as we keep communicating and supporting each other, we can achieve that future." As we drove home, I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. The postnuptial agreement had been a difficult but necessary step, and it had brought us closer together in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was a foundation upon which we could build a stronger, more resilient marriage. In the weeks that followed, Melissa and I continued to work on our relationship, each day bringing us closer to the future we both envisioned. The scars of the past remained, but they were slowly healing, replaced by a growing bond built on trust, honesty, and unwavering commitment. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Melissa turned to me with a smile. "Tommy, thank you for believing in us, for giving us a second chance." "I believe in us because I believe in you," I replied, wrapping my arm around her. "We've been through a lot, but we're stronger for it. And I know that as long as we keep moving forward together, we can face anything." She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. "I love you, Tommy." "I love you too, Melissa," I said, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "And I always will." As the sun dipped below the horizon, we sat together in silence, knowing that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but we were ready to face them together, with a stronger foundation and a renewed commitment to our future. With the postnuptial agreement in place, we began to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose. It felt like we had crossed a significant threshold, one that marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. The agreement was more than just a legal document. It was a testament to our commitment to each other and our determination to rebuild our marriage. Our counseling sessions with Dr. Lang continued, providing a safe space for us to explore the complexities of our relationship. Each session was a journey into the depths of our emotions, unearthing the hidden fears and insecurities that had fueled our conflicts. "Melissa, how do you feel about the progress you've made so far?" Dr. Lang asked during one of our sessions. "I feel hopeful," Melissa replied, her voice steady but reflective. "I know I've made mistakes, and I can't undo the past, but I'm committed to making things right. I've learned to communicate better, to be more honest about my feelings. It's been hard, but it's also been rewarding." "And you, Tommy?" Dr. Lang turned to me. "How do you feel about the changes in your relationship?" I took a moment to gather my thoughts. I've seen a real change in Melissa. She's more open, more attentive, and genuinely invested in our marriage. It's helped me to let go of some of my anger and hurt. I'm starting to believe in the possibility of a new beginning for us. Dr. Lang nodded, a small smile on her lips. "That's wonderful to hear. Remember, rebuilding trust takes time and patience. The progress you've made is significant, and it's important to acknowledge that." After the session, as we walked back to the car, Melissa reached for my hand. "Thank you, Tommy, for giving us this chance. I know it hasn't been easy." "It hasn't," I agreed, squeezing her hand gently. "But it's been worth it. We're moving forward, and that's what matters." Melissa's efforts to regain my trust were genuine, and I could see the change in her. She became more open, sharing her thoughts and feelings with me without hesitation. She was attentive to my needs, making small but meaningful gestures that showed her commitment to our relationship. Whether it was a heartfelt note left on my desk or a surprise dinner, her actions spoke volumes about her dedication to making things work. I, too, found myself softening my stance. The anger and resentment that had once clouded my heart were gradually replaced by a sense of hope and optimism. I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of a new beginning, to embrace the idea that we could build a stronger, more resilient marriage. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Melissa turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Tommy, do you remember the first time we sat here together?" I smiled, recalling the memory. "Of course I do. It was the night after our wedding. We sat here, talking about our dreams for the future." She nodded, a wistful look in her eyes. "I think about that night often, how hopeful and excited we were. I want to get back to that place, where we can dream about our future together without any shadows hanging over us." "We're getting there," I said, wrapping my arm around her, one step at a time. The shadow of Jason still lingered, but it no longer held the same power over us. His attempts to disrupt our lives had failed, and we had emerged stronger for it. The fear and uncertainty that had once gripped us were replaced by a sense of resilience and determination. As the weeks turned into months, our bond grew stronger. We made a conscious effort to spend more quality time together, rediscovering the joys of each other's company. We took long walks, cooked meals together, and planned small trips to rekindle the romance that had been overshadowed by the turmoil. One weekend, we decided to visit a quaint bed and breakfast in the countryside. The serene landscape, with its rolling hills and blooming flowers, provided the perfect backdrop for our retreat. We spent our days exploring the picturesque surroundings and our evenings wrapped in each other's arms, talking about everything and nothing. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Melissa looked at me with a serious expression. "Tommy, I need to say something." "What's on your mind?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "I want you to know that I am fully committed to us. I know I've said it before, but I want you to really understand how much you mean to me. I will never take our relationship for granted again." Her words touched me deeply. "I believe you, Melissa, and I want you to know that I'm committed to us too. We've been through a lot, but we've also come a long way. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that." Tears welled up in her eyes as she leaned in to kiss me. "I love you too, Tommy, more than words can say." As we held each other, I felt a profound sense of peace. Our journey had been fraught with challenges, but it had also brought us closer together. We had learned to communicate, to forgive, and to cherish the moments we shared. With the post-nuptial agreement in place and our renewed commitment to each other, we were ready to face whatever the future held. The past had shaped us, but it no longer defined us. We were stronger, more united, and ready to embark on a new beginning together. As we looked towards the future, Melissa and I knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The scars from the past still lingered, subtle reminders of the challenges we had overcome. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, but we were both committed to the journey. Our love, tested by deceit and betrayal, had emerged stronger, tempered by the trials we had faced. One morning, as we sat on the porch with our coffee, Melissa broke the silence. "Tommy, do you ever worry that we might fall back into old patterns?" I looked at her, seeing the concern in her eyes. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I also believe we've learned a lot from what happened. We've become more aware of each other's needs, and we've made a commitment to communicate openly. That makes a big difference." She nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "I think about that too. I know we can't erase the past, but we can learn from it. And I feel like we've done a lot of learning." "We have," I agreed. "And we have to keep learning every day. It's about making that effort consistently, even when things get tough." Melissa reached over and took my hand. I'm willing to put in that effort, Tommy. Every day. I love you, and I want to build a future with you, grounded in honesty, respect, and unwavering commitment. I feel the same way, I said, squeezing her hand. We're in this together. Our conversations often turn to the future, not just the immediate future, but the long-term vision we had for our lives together. We talked about our dreams, our aspirations, and how we could support each other in achieving them. It was a process of rediscovery, finding new ways to connect and deepen our bond. One evening, as we walked through a nearby park, Melissa turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Tommy, do you think we should start planning some long-term goals? Like maybe buying a vacation home or starting a small business together? I considered her suggestion. I think that's a great idea. Having shared goals can give us something to look forward to and work towards together. What kind of business were you thinking? Well, she said, her eyes lighting up, I've always loved the idea of running a small bed and breakfast, a place where we can create a welcoming space for guests, share our love of cooking and hospitality. I smiled, imagining the possibilities. I like that idea. It sounds like a lot of work, but also a lot of fun, and it's something we can build together. Exactly, she said, her excitement growing. It would be our project, a way to create new memories and build something lasting. As we walked and talked, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and excitement about the future. We were no longer just trying to survive the aftermath of betrayal. We were actively building a new life together, one step at a time. The shadows of our past would always be a part of our story, but they no longer defined us. Instead, they served as reminders of our resilience and our ability to overcome adversity. We had faced some of the darkest moments in our relationship and emerged stronger, more united. There were still moments of doubt and insecurity, but we had learned to address them head-on, rather than letting them fester. When either of us felt vulnerable or unsure, we talked about it openly, reassuring each other of our commitment and love. One night, as we lay in bed, Melissa turned to me with a question that had been on her mind. Tommy, what do you think has been the most important thing we've learned from all of this? I thought for a moment before answering. I think the most important thing we've learned is the value of communication. We can't take each other for granted or assume that everything is fine. We have to talk, really talk, about what's going on in our hearts and minds. She nodded, a soft smile on her lips. I agree. Communication has been key. And also forgiveness. Learning to forgive each other and ourselves has been crucial. Absolutely, I said, wrapping my arm around her. Forgiveness and communication. Those are the foundations of our new beginning. As we drifted off to sleep, I felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. The road ahead might be long and challenging, but we were ready to face it together. Our love, tested and strengthened by the trials we had faced, was now grounded in honesty, respect, and unwavering commitment. Together, we were determined to build a life filled with joy, love, and shared dreams. The future was ours to create, and we were ready to embrace it, one day at a time, hand in hand.